Welcome back to our history tour. This time, we travel further back than anywhere else on the entire journey, to a continent that no human being had ever seen. For millions of years, North America existed and no one was here to see it. No cities, no names, no borders, no human eyes to watch the sun come up over the mountains. Just a vast, wild continent changing slowly and sometimes violently across spans of time so long the human mind can barely hold them. Before there was an America, there was the land. And the land has a story that begins hundreds of millions of years before the first person ever set foot on it. This is that story. The story of a continent long before anyone knew it was there. Let me start with something that sounds almost impossible. The mountains you think of as old are, in some cases, far older than that. The Appalachian Mountains, running down the eastern side of the continent, are among the oldest mountains on the entire planet. They began rising more than 400 million years ago, long before the first dinosaur, back when the only forests on Earth were strange and primitive. They rose in stages, and the greatest push came when the continents themselves collided and crushed together. And here is the strange part. Those worn green ridges you can drive through today were once colossal, jagged, towering peaks that likely rivaled the Himalayas. Everything you see now, the soft, rounded shapes, the gentle forested slopes, is simply what is left after hundreds of millions of years of wind and rain slowly grinding them down. You are not looking at old mountains. You are looking at the eroded roots of ancient giants. Think about what that collision actually created. It helped weld nearly all of the world's land into a single supercontinent, which we call Pangaea. North America was fused to Africa, to Europe, to South America, all of it one enormous mass. And then, slowly, over millions of years, it began to tear apart again. As Pangaea split, a brand new ocean was born in the widening gap between the pieces. That ocean is the Atlantic, and it is still opening today, still pushing the continents apart, at roughly the speed your fingernails grow. The map of the world is not a fixed thing. It is a single frozen frame from a film that is still running. The West tells the opposite story. The Rocky Mountains are young by comparison, pushed up only tens of millions of years ago, still sharp, still tall, in some places still rising. One continent, two great mountain ranges, and hundreds of millions of years of history standing between them. And the same forces that build this land are matched by the forces that carve it. In the American Southwest, a single river, the Colorado, spent millions of years cutting down through solid rock and slowly opened the Grand Canyon. Stand on its rim, and you are not just looking at a canyon. You are looking at time itself, laid bare in the layers of the walls. The stone at the very bottom is close to 2 billion years old. Almost half the entire age of the Earth is on display in one gorge, carved open by nothing more than patient water and time. And the shape of the whole continent has changed almost beyond recognition. For a long stretch during the age of dinosaurs, North America was not even one solid piece of land. A vast, shallow sea, which scientists call the Western Interior Seaway, cut straight through the middle of the continent, from the Arctic all the way down to the Gulf, splitting it into an eastern half and a western half. Warm, shallow water rolled where the Great Plains are now, and it was full of enormous marine reptiles, long-necked hunters and massive sea lizards that were not dinosaurs at all, but ruled that vanished ocean. On the dry land around that sea walked some of the most famous animals that ever lived. This was their home, tens of millions of years before it was anyone's country. Tyrannosaurus rex hunted across what is now Montana and the Dakotas. Triceratops moved across the same ground. The rock beds of the American West are so rich with their remains that a huge share of everything the world knows about dinosaurs was dug out of this one continent. And then, about 66 million years ago, it ended. An asteroid several miles wide slammed into the planet, and the long reign of the dinosaurs was over almost in an instant of geological time. In the darkness and cold that followed, the giants died. But their end was another group's beginning. Small, furry, warm-blooded survivors, the early mammals, crept out into an emptied world and slowly, over millions of years, began to inherit it. Now roll forward again, and the whole world cools. We arrive at the era most people actually picture when they imagine prehistoric America, the Ice Age. And the first thing worth clearing up is that it was not one single frozen moment. It was a whole series of deep freezes, with warmer spells in between, playing out across the last couple of million years. At the coldest peaks, Gigantic sheets of ice, in places a mile or even 2 miles thick, ground their way down from the north and buried much of what is now Canada and the northern United States under solid, crushing glacier. Those ice sheets were landscapers on a scale nothing else can match. As they advanced and retreated, they scraped away hills, carved out valleys, and gouged enormous basins into the bedrock. The Great Lakes, which together hold about a fifth of all the fresh surface water on Earth, are essentially scars left behind by that ice. So much of the planet's water was locked up in these glaciers that the oceans themselves dropped, exposing land that is deep underwater today. Remember that detail. It matters enormously for what comes later. When you look at a map of the northern United States, much of what you are seeing was shaped, quite literally, by walls of moving ice. And when all that ice finally melted, it did not always go quietly. In the Pacific Northwest, a vast lake held back by a dam of ice burst open again and again, sending walls of water hundreds of feet high roaring across the land, tearing up and rearranging whole regions in a matter of days. The scars of those floods are still carved into the ground today if you know how to read them. But do not picture the Ice Age as an empty white wasteland, because it was anything but. The America of this era was home to some of the most spectacular animals the continent has ever seen, and almost every one of them is gone now. Picture mammoths. Most people imagine the shaggy, woolly mammoth of the frozen north, and yes, they were here in the far north. But the signature giant across much of North America was actually its bigger cousin, the Columbian mammoth. Taller, far less hairy, roaming the open country from the plains all the way down into what is now Mexico. Moving through the forests alongside them was the American mastodon, a stockier, elephant-like relative built for the woodlands. And it goes on and it gets stranger. Giant ground sloths, some the size of an ox, and their largest southern relatives as big as an elephant, rearing up on their hind legs to pull branches from the trees. And here is a genuinely surprising piece of history. One of those ground sloths is tied to a founding father. In 1797, Thomas Jefferson, years before he became president, studied a set of huge fossil claws pulled from a cave and was so captivated that he presented them to a scientific society. The creature was eventually named Megalonyx jeffersonii in his honor. Jefferson genuinely wondered whether such animals might still be alive somewhere out in the unexplored western wilderness, and he asked explorers to watch for them. They never found any. The great sloths had been gone for thousands of years. There was more still. Saber-toothed cats with those unmistakable curved fangs ambushing prey in the brush. Dire wolves, which were not a fantasy but a real animal, heavier and stronger than the gray wolves of today. The American lion, among the largest cats that has ever lived. And the short-faced bear, which, standing on its hind legs, could have looked a grown man in the eye and then kept going upward. And here is the one that genuinely surprises almost everyone. The horse. Horses did not begin in Europe or out on the steppes of Asia. They evolved right here in North America over tens of millions of years, from small forest creatures no bigger than a dog into the animal we know today. For most of their long history, the horse was an American animal. Then, like so many others, they crossed over a land bridge in the far north into Asia and spread across the entire Old World. And then, in the very place they had first appeared, the horse died out completely, wiped away with the other giants at the end of the Ice Age. For thousands of years, there was not a single horse anywhere in the Americas. They would not set foot here again until Europeans carried them back across the ocean, home to a continent that had completely forgotten them. And in one remarkable place, we can almost stand among all of them. In the middle of what is now the city of Los Angeles, sticky natural tar has been seeping up to the surface for tens of thousands of years. Animals wandered into it and got stuck, and then the predators that came to feed on them got trapped as well, and the tar quietly preserved their bones by the millions. The La Brea tar pits are a direct window into that lost world, dug up today from beneath a modern city, an entire Ice Age ecosystem pressed into the ground beneath the traffic. And then, within just a few thousand years, almost all of these great animals were gone. The mammoths, the sloths, the saber-toothed cats, the giant bears vanished. Why so many of them disappeared so quickly is still argued over to this day, and it is a question we will come back to because the answer may have a great deal to do with what happens next. So let me put the whole thing together and picture it as one place. A continent with some of the oldest mountains on Earth in the east and sharp young peaks in the west. a land that had once been split in two by a warm inland sea and ruled by dinosaurs. A world only just emerging from great walls of ice and roamed by mammoths, sloths, wild horses, dire wolves, and saber-toothed cats. It was rich. It was alive. It was, in almost every sense, complete. And through all of it, across all those hundreds of millions of years, one thing was missing. Us. There were no people here, not one. For very nearly the entire history of this land, the human story simply had not begun. Every single sunrise fell on a continent that no person had ever seen. Every herd, every forest, every winding river existed with nobody there to name it, or map it, or claim it. But that was about to change. Because far to the northwest, at the very edge of this frozen world, something was on its way. Not conquerors, not explorers, at least not in the way we usually mean that word. Just small groups of people, following the animals, following the food, across a bridge of land that the Ice Age itself had uncovered when the seas fell away. They had no idea what was waiting on the far side. An entire, untouched continent, with everything you have just heard about still living and breathing across it. And the moment they arrived, the human story of America finally began. That is exactly where we go next.